Here's the issue. Apps without proper paywalls just don't make money, or at least not as much as they could be. Most indie developers just slap on a basic paywall and call it a day. But you can do much, much better and earn more money by iterating on your paywall and features. What's important is to create a paywall that converts by working on its placement. You should change which features are free or paid depending on how well they sell. And you should be able to update your paywall without having to ship an app update, as that would just slow down your progress a ton. So let me introduce you to Superwall, your all-in-one paywall management SDK. Superwall supports all of the features I just mentioned and tons of other features as well. In this video, we will be using their Swift SDK to integrate Superwall into one of my apps. We will be creating a new paywall UI without writing any code whatsoever. And we'll be able to change that UI without shipping an update to our app. You will also learn about placements and how you can use them to change which features are paid on the go. If you want to follow this tutorial with your own app, I would recommend you to open the Superwall documentation that's linked in the video description in a second tab. Thank you Superwall for sponsoring this video, and let's get started. Okay, so let's get started integrating the Superwall SDK into our iOS app that already uses RevenueCat. So we will be doing a very specific setup here. And of course, I have opened the Superwall documentation here because it's actually quite extensive and very easy to follow. So on this Swift Package Manager page here, we will just scroll down until we have the repository URL, and I will copy that and then jump right into Xcode. Now, it is to note that I'm currently using Xcode 15.4 because there is an issue with Xcode 16 going on where you can't add packages. So this, of course, has nothing to do with the Superwall SDK, and this happens for all of the packages that I have tried. This is why I have went back to Xcode 15, just in case you run into the same issue. So as always, adding Swift packages can be done in various different ways. So I have now gone into the project tab and went into the package dependencies page. Then I will click this little plus button here, and that will open up the package explorer, and here the list of recently used packages loads. And I always wait until this list finished loading, otherwise I have run into issues with pasting this URL in here. So let's do just that, and you will see package gets selected. You don't really need to change any of these settings here. Of course, you can play around if there is a specific version of the Superwall SDK that you want to use for whatever reason that may be. You can, of course, do that here. Default, of course, just leave it to up to next major version. And then you just click Add Package. And once this resolves and everything is being downloaded, you can add it to your target, which in this case is my habit tracker app that we will be using for this example. All right, so now the package has finished loading, and I will have to select a target. Now in this example, I'm only adding it to the main app itself, so to the iOS app, and I'm ignoring the widgets extension as I don't need a paywall in my widget. So I will just hit add package, and then we're good to go with this part of the setup. So now for the next part of our setup, I have went back into Xcode 16, as this is the current and most up-to-date version of Xcode. And I will, of course, be using that for this implementation. So now you can notice that in our package dependencies list, we do have SuperwallKit in here. So now we can actually use it in our app. To do that, let's go back to documentation briefly, and then you will see that there is a configuring the SDK tab here, or a section. And of course, there is a way to just use Superwall itself, but you can also use it in conjunction with RevenueCat. And this is the setup that I will be showing you from now on out. And when you're using it with RevenueCat, there are two different setup options for you to do. So either, and this is what we will be using as part of this tutorial for now, either you use a purchase controller. So use this route if you want to maintain control over purchasing logic and code. And you can see the purchase controller is in here. And of course, the documentation supports different frameworks and languages, but we will be using Swift. Then the second option would be to use purchases as are completed by. So here you don't need to use a purchase controller, and you tell RevenueCat that purchases are completed by your app using StoreKit. So independent from the RevenueCat SDK. In this mode, RevenueCat will observe the purchases that the Superwall SDK makes. And for that, they're of course using the App Store Connect API as far as I understand. And then there would be more information here in case you want to read through it. So in this example now, I will just copy this RC purchase controller using this copy button up here. And then in Xcode, I will create a new file, new empty file. And I will call this RC purchase controller.swift. And in here, I will just paste whatever we just copied from the Superwall documentation. And in here, you can see that we now have our RC purchase controller class, which will then link up all of the Superwall stuff with the RevenueCat implementation. And as you can see, it's not even that much code just for subscription status synchronization, handling purchases made through Superwall, and then handling restores made through the Superwall paywalls. And then after we have added this purchase controller, let's scroll down, and then we need to configure Superwall. So here would be an example of how to use it with the purchases are completed by my app, but we actually want to have this setup here. So we need to initialize an instance of RC purchase controller and pass it into superwall.configure. So let's copy this code snippet. And as I am using Swift UI and not UIKit, we will be doing this on the app level. And in here, of course, we will be importing SuperwallKit. And then in our initializer is where we will be placing this copied piece of code. So we're creating our purchase controller that we just copied over from the documentation. And then we are initializing Superwall with our API key and our purchase controller. And you, of course, have to enter your Superwall API key here. I have gone ahead and created a secrets.swift file with my API keys for both RevenueCat and Superwall. You can, of course, do the same, or you can just enter your API key as a string here. That doesn't really matter in this context. One thing to note is that when using Superwall, you can identify your users by creating a user ID. This would be useful if you have some sort of sign-in functionality or login functionality. In the habit tracker that we're using as an example here, there is no such thing. So we will be using the anonymous user feature, which is turned on by default in Superwall. All right, so with the setup stuff out of the way, let's now talk about showing paywalls in your apps and how all of that is handled in the Superwall SDK. And actually, it does take an approach that you might not be used to, but it actually makes a lot of sense. So as the documentation says, at the heart of Superwall's SDK lies the register event function. So this allows you to register a placement, which is basically like a feature or an action in your app. And then this placement can be guarded by the paywall, or it can be set to being free without needing a purchase for the user. So how do you set these events or placements? There is a very simple function, superwall.shared.register event. And you call that basically as a containing function or as a closure around whatever is the actual logic that you want to execute, or that you want to have guarded by your paywall, or perhaps not guarded by your paywall, but have the opportunity to make this a pro-only feature later on. And this is a big strength of using Superwall for your paywalls. So let's just do it as an example here. I have a bunch of buttons and other functionality in this view that might be a pro feature. So in this case, I have already decided that they will be a pro feature. As you can see, I already did some logic in here. But of course, I might want to add this to the free tier in the future and change stuff around with what's paid and what's free. With Superwall, that's actually super easy. So first of all, let's go to the top of the file and import SuperwallKit, as we will be using functions out of that. And then we are finding our button here. And if the user is a pro, so if they have subscribed, I want to show the edit history sheet. So instead of just calling that logic directly, we will say superwall.shared.register an event. So the Xcode autocomplete here isn't very helpful. And then we can give this event a name. So in the context of this tutorial, I will just enter the name as a string, but I would suggest you to make this type safe in some sort of fashion as some static string on an enum or whatever. You can access it to avoid having typos in your strings. So in this case, I would just call it edit history event, something like this. Of course, the naming convention is totally up to you and your code base. This is just an example. So do whatever you like with these event names. of course, you will need them later on to configure them in the Superwall dashboard. Just like this, we've now guarded this edit history sheet by the edit history event in Superwall. And then, of course, we can get rid of this disabled modifier here, and we can do the same for this button down here, for example. So here we can once again say superwall.share.register event, and in here you might name this archive habit event, something like this. And then we can also get rid of this disabled in here. This share link would have to be handled in a bit of a different way, so I'm skipping that as part of this tutorial. This is a bit more advanced, and you can play around with this functionality yourself, even though I don't expect you to actually have share links in your apps. All right, so now we've added both of these event registrations to our buttons that we want to guard by a paywall. All right, so after creating an account and registering with Superwall, this is the screen that we are prompted with when going to the Superwall dashboard. So we can enter our app name, and in this case, I will just call it Habit Tracker because that's the name of my Xcode project. And then I will say is a new iOS app. The company name will just be the company name that's associated with your app. Primary platform in this case will be iOS. Language and framework will be Swift. So let's hit create here. So this is the Superwall dashboard right here. And of course, it starts you out with installing the SDK, which we have already done. And then we can click next. We already added the package. Yeah, exactly. We did configure the SDK. We did register an event. And in our case, we registered the edit history event. So let me just go ahead and copy that. We also registered the archive habit event. So we have done that. So let's say next. So they have created an example campaign for us with an event called campaign trigger, but we will of course set that up ourselves and change that to be our actual event. So let's hit next there. So they're telling us to register an event called campaign trigger. We're not going to do that. All right, and then next up, we will have to configure our product, and we will do that in App Store Connect. So see you there in a second. So they're saying to go to our application name, then to subscriptions and subscription group. So that's where we are, subscription groups over here. And then copy your products from each subscription group into Superwall. So let's go into the Superwall products page, and we can add all of the products that we have in our subscription here. So in this case, I will be adding this monthly subscription here. So for the product identifier, I will just copy that over from App Store Connect. Let me check if there is a trial for the subscription. I'm actually not sure right now. So it doesn't look like there is a trial. So then let's select the price, which we can do right here in the subscription prices setting. So let me look for United. All right, so it doesn't like search terms. So let's see, United States would be $1.99. So let's select that from the drop-down menu, and the period, as the PID suggests, is monthly. So let's hit save here, and now we have registered our monthly subscription product. And then we can go back to the quick start guide. Of course, we already did all of this. So configure your product. And then since we are using RevenueCat, we have this second tab here. So first one was configure the products from App Store Connect, which we already did. And next, we need to make sure that these products are active in the entitlements and offerings in RevenueCat. So let me jump to that page and show you how that should be looking right now. So I am inside of this habit tracker project on RevenueCat's website now. And here you can see that the PID, the product, the monthly subscription that we just added to Superwall, is active as the habits.pro entitlement in RevenueCat. So that's also good. So we can hit next here. And next we should add products to our paywall. So let's open up the paywall editor for that. So we can go to the products tab over here, and we can select the primary product and the secondary product, and we can actually get rid of the secondary and tertiary as we only have one product for this paywall over here. So looking back at this, we can hit next, and for some reason it didn't quite recognize that we did that yet, but so perhaps we need to hit publish over here. So let's hit publish in the paywall editor. So in this campaigns tab of the Superwall dashboard, we have the example campaign here. And if we have a look at that, you will notice that it has the wrong event placement, because this one has campaign trigger. But we can just hit plus here and add our edit history event in here. And then we can perhaps also grab our archive habit event and add that as a placement as well. Of course, with different placements, you can have different campaigns and different paywalls and so on. But now we have added the edit history event and the archive habit event as well. One more thing that we need to set up is to add the purchase controller.sync subscription status call here after we set up RevenueCat or purchases and Superwall or SuperwallKit. And we need to make sure that the subscription status is synced between RevenueCat and Superwall. So Superwall knows if you are subscribed or if your user is subscribed or is not subscribed, in order to evaluate whether they should be seeing the paywall or whether the paywall should be skipped. So don't forget to add this call here. And now with everything in place, we have our app running here in the simulator. And we can press one of these buttons, and then the paywall that we just configured will come up. And of course, you can change this however you'd like. Now, in our case, of course, it doesn't make sense to have this view all plans button in here, because obviously there is only the monthly plan for this app. But going back to the Superwall editor, we have our products tab here, and in here you could add a secondary product. And if you have a second subscription or a lifetime pass, for example, you could add that here as well. And that way, this particular kind of paywall would make a lot more sense. Inside of the paywall editor here, we can edit every single element on screen. And one thing I want to show you, because I think this is very, very interesting. Of course, there's tons of different attributes that you can change for all of these elements, and you can add many predefined or custom elements in here as well. But something that I find very interesting is the ability to add custom CSS. So in this example, let's add a property to this badge over here. And this will just be a very, very simple example. I will use the display property, because if you set this to none, then the element will be hidden from the screen. So we could add this as a property now, and then the element would be hidden. Of course, we could also just delete it from the layout tree over here, but this is just an example of what you can do. And of course, if you get rid of the value or even the custom CSS property, then the object is shown again. But let's add that one more time. So let's say display, set that to none, and then we can publish this paywall. And this will take a few seconds and the editor will reload. So here we are again. Now you can notice the element is no longer there because we have hidden it. So let's go into our app, and of course here the badge is still there. And now if we just restart the app, so of course I'm reinstalling it, but in reality this is just a restart of the app because we changed nothing in the code. We can now go back into the paywall or back into our button that registers the event that triggers the campaign that then in the end shows the paywall to the user. And now you can notice this 50% discount label is gone from the paywall without the need of shipping an update through the App Store. So we were able to remotely configure the paywall and remotely update the paywall, and everything will be reflected once the user opens the app without any software update. How easy was that? We just implemented a paywall that can be fully customized without shipping app updates, that allows us to iterate on our copy, placement, and feature gating. My favorite part about all of this really is that we can make these changes on the go, as this just saves so much time. We implemented a system that allows remote configuration of where paywalls are shown in our app. But sometimes you want to be able to present a paywall manually as well. Superwall, of course, also allows you to do that in their most recent update, and they have a guide that walks you through everything you need to know. There is an option for both UIKit and SwiftUI now. Once you're ready to publish your app with the Superwall paywall integrated in the App Store, the Superwall documentation has a great overview of how you should fill out the privacy labels in App Store Connect. Make sure you give this page a quick read before submitting, as it can save you from a lot of trouble down the road. And speaking of launching your app, they even have a pre-launch checklist that you can have a look at while getting your app ready to ship. You can find this checklist and all the other documentation pages that I just talked about linked right below the video. If you need some more inspiration or just some examples on how to use Superwall's SDK, you can head over to their example repository on GitHub, which I also linked below the video. So go give Superwall a try by going to their website using the link in the video description. Start iterating on your paywalls and make some money with your apps.